At some point, I decided I needed to figure myself out. I'm not sure exactly when, but somewhere along the way, it became a project. Who am I? What do I want? Why do I do the things I do? And I went after it, read things, thought about things, analyzed, reflected, tried to connect the dots. And I kept waiting for the moment it would click, where I'd finally have the answer. But the more I looked, the more there was to look at. If this feels familiar, stay with me. It starts as a reasonable idea. The desire to understand yourself isn't strange. It makes sense. You want to know what drives you, why certain things bother you and others don't, why you keep ending up in the same situations. That's not neurotic. That's just paying attention. The problem isn't the curiosity. The problem is when the curiosity turns into a project with a deadline, something you're supposed to complete, something you should have finished by now. The search becomes the default. Here's what happens over time. The searching becomes its own habit. I'll be in the middle of something, a conversation, a decision, a feeling, and instead of just being in it, I'm analyzing it. Why am I reacting this way? What does this say about me? Is this a pattern? Have I always done this? And the analysis runs on top of everything, like a second screen that never turns off. It's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain because it looks like self-awareness, but it doesn't always feel like it. I remember going through a phase where I was journaling a lot, every morning and sometimes at night, pages and pages about what I was feeling, what I was noticing, what it meant. And for a while, yeah, it felt productive, like I was making progress, like I was getting somewhere. But after a few months, I flipped back through it and I noticed something. The same questions were showing up month after month. Different words, same questions. And I remember feeling this strange mix of things. Part of me thought, I haven't figured this out yet. But another part of me started wondering, what if there isn't a final answer to figure out? You might have had something like this too, where you realized you've been circling the same thing for a long, long time. The assumption underneath it all, there's a belief running underneath this whole thing, quiet, rarely examined. The belief that you are a fixed thing, something with a true nature, a real self that exists somewhere underneath all the layers. And if you look just hard enough, long enough, and careful enough, you'll find it. And once you find it, you'll finally know. But I'm not sure that it works like that, because every time I think I've found it, something shifts in me, and I'm back to not quite being sure. You can't solve something that keeps moving. This is the part that doesn't get said enough. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago, or maybe even last year. Things happened. You changed. Your values shifted slightly. Your priorities moved. What mattered then doesn't quite hit the same way now. And that's going to keep happening. Which means the self you're trying to figure out isn't sitting still long enough to be figured out. It's moving slowly, quietly, but moving. What if there's nothing to solve? What if this need to figure yourself out is based on a problem that doesn't exist? Not because you don't matter, not because self-reflection is pointless, but because you're not a problem. You're not a puzzle with a correct solution. You're not a project someone forgot to complete. You're a person, and people change. They contradict themselves. They want different things at different times. They grow in directions they didn't plan on growing. And maybe that's not a flaw in the system. Maybe that's just what being a person actually looks like. I remember hitting a wall with it. Not dramatically. I didn't have a breakdown or a revelation. I was just tired. Tired of thinking about myself. Tired of the analysis. Tired of treating every feeling like a clue to something deeper. And I remember thinking, what would happen if I just stopped? Not forever, just for a bit. So I did. And something strange happened. Things didn't fall apart. I didn't lose myself. If anything, I felt more myself. Like the searching had been the thing pulling me out of it. You might have had a version of that where the relief wasn't finding the answer. It was just putting the question down. Self-awareness has a point of diminishing returns. There's a version of self-reflection that genuinely helps. It gives you a language, a perspective, understanding. It helps you see patterns and make better choices. That version is useful, but there's another version that just loops around and around and around, where you're not gaining clarity anymore. You're just staying busy inside your own head. And the more you do it, the further away you get from actually living, because you're not in your life. You're above it, watching it, commenting on it, instead of being in it. I had a conversation once, and someone said something about me. Not an analysis, just an observation. Something simple. And it was so accurate, so immediately true, that it landed in a way that months of journaling hadn't. And I remember thinking, they saw that in about 10 minutes. I'd been trying to see it for years. And I think that's the strange thing about figuring yourself out. Sometimes other people can see more clearly than you can. Not because they know more, but because they're not inside it. You might have had that too, where someone said something simple and it was just exactly right. Maybe you don't need to figure it out. Maybe the goal isn't to arrive at a final understanding of yourself. Maybe it's something quieter than that. To notice what you're drawn to pay attention to what feels real and what doesn't, to make small adjustments as you go. Not a project, not a conclusion, just a direction. And maybe the self you've been trying to figure out is already showing up in how you live, in what you choose, in what you care about, even when you're not looking for it. I still catch myself doing it, starting to analyze something when I could just be in it. That habit doesn't disappear, but I do notice it faster now. And sometimes I make a different choice. I put the question down. I come back to what's actually happening. Not because I've figured myself out, but because I realized I don't have to. Not completely, not once and for all, just enough to keep moving. And maybe that's what figuring yourself out actually looks like. Not a destination, just a direction you keep returning to. I'm Scott Stewart, and you're not crazy.